I'm Flannel Boy. Now, we all know that a show can jump the shark, but can an entire network jump the shark? Yeah, it can. The term jump the shark was coined by John Hine, who became famous for listing when 200 shows went bad. It was named after an episode in Happy Days when the Fonz jumps over the shark. No, in Happy Days. This is the original context of the phrase, to mean TV shows, while it's expanded to include all pop culture in general. I haven't done any TV shows yet for this reason. By the way the phrase became famous, there are already 200 TV examples out there, for which I've been beaten to the punch. So with respect to the original list, I have to either do one that wasn't on the list, or propose an alternative date to one that was on the list. But this is actually easy for me, since the list was published in 1997 and all the shark jumps so far have been in the 2000s. And as somebody with perspective befitting my age, one of the biggest shark jumps of my era was...
Oh, Nickelodeon!
Specifically, I'm looking at Nicktoons today, because they were always my favorite part of Nickelodeon. I mean, I like the live-action shows, sure, but Nicktoons was really the reason I tuned in. And the reason I stopped watching cartoons was when they turned bad, and it really did happen all at once. I was introduced to Nicktoons in the late 90s, so yeah, I missed Ren and Stimpy and Rocko's Modern Life, and I only remember Doug as a Disney cartoon. Ren and Stimpy really seems out of place and has more of the style of a Cartoon Network thing than anything I've seen on Nick, which explains why Cartoon Network bought it. Doug was nice but kinda dull, and I didn't watch Disney as much. From what I've seen of Rocko, it's a decent proto-SpongeBob type of thing, and actually what I consider the first real Nick-style Nicktoon. Wait, second. I'm forgetting the Rugrats. That show grew on me a bit because it seemed boring initially. Now I'm looking at it and realizing the Classic Xubo team were really a stylistic bunch, indeed. Beyond the characters with annoying voices. They had personality, too. Check out Duckman if you have the chance, by the way, it's great. I loved Hey Arnold, another real Nick-style venture. They put a lot of heart into some episodes, not unlike the Rugrats, but this was more middle school aged and a lot less immature in humor. They also beat Seth MacFarlane to having a football-headed kid. A part of the style I like is partially because I love New York. No, not the snowy wasteland in which I currently reside, the city. From years of living in suburbia Connecticut, I grew to adore the place, and Hey Arnold showed exactly the type of community spirit that made it cool. A lot of that show demonstrates the diverse community that New York offers, with each of the characters having a separate background. It wasn't always funny, but they could make it personal. And sometimes it did have some style associated with the storytelling. My favorite episode was the Christmas special. That whole storyline with Mr. Wynn was really powerful. And everyone in that show, everyone in New York in fact, has a story to tell just like that. Cat Dog was a little less touching and a lot more mean-spirited. Not as cartoonishly cruel as Ren and Stimpy, but really down on the world. It was like Rocko's Modern Life in that respect, but it lasted a bit longer and came later. Honestly, the pessimistic perspective is a lot more refreshing after years of watching cartoons that look just like SpongeBob. Not that I don't like SpongeBob, I love SpongeBob. The humor in SpongeBob is the best of all Nickelodeon cartoons. For the first few seasons, there were a whole list of classic moments. It had style, it had nonsense, it had characters, and...
Hold on just a sec.
Hello?
Is this the Krusty Krab?
No, this is Patrick! And everybody in the audience between the ages of 8 and 20 got that joke. It was justly popular, and I'm gonna have to get back to it. The early 2000s Nicktoons were ruled by three main forces: SpongeBob, Classic Xubo, and Butch Hartman. Yes, there were other shows. There were cult hits like Invader Zim and complete flops like Pelswick, but the average Nick viewer, me, didn't see much of those, as they didn't last very long. Classic Xubo was on a roll for a while. Riding the success of Rugrats past a couple of movies, they got 4 subsequent shows released, each one with at least 4 seasons in it. They could range from world-traveling fantasy to action sports to teen dramas. Of all of them, All Grown Up gets a really bad rap, and with good reason. It was really boring. Now about Butch Hartman. If you don't know who he is, you probably heard of at least one of his Nicktoons. He's like the Seth MacFarlane of Nicktoons. He made like 3 shows that all look the same on the same network. Apparently he works with Seth MacFarlane sometimes, too, and before Nickelodeon, they were both working for Hanna-Barbera. Huh. So I'm going to explain what a Butch Hartman cartoon is like the only way I know how. Jeff Foxworthy style. If your eyebrows are made of rectangles, you might be in a Butch Hartman cartoon. If you make funny sounds when you just look at people, you might be in a Butch Hartman cartoon. If your school has a bunch of 80s style stereotypical bullies, popular kids and losers, and you are the losers, you might be in a Butch Hartman cartoon. If your parents are complete idiots, you might be in a Butch Hartman cartoon. If the music is this big jazz band stuff, you might be in a Butch Hartman cartoon. If the name of your town either explains the whole premise of the show or is generally stupid, you might be in a Butch Hartman cartoon. If your series has a lot of movies associated with it, you might be in a Butch Hartman cartoon. If your series is actually funny, you might be SpongeBob. Well, I didn't like them much, but empirically, I'll admit they weren't that bad. There are a few scenes that really annoy my nerdiness, like when they go back in time to 1600 and it's all Puritan buckle hats when they live in Southern California.
In California?
Or that time when they say that Bill Gates invented the internet. Come on, Butch, I know you're California-centric, but give Al Gore his due. Also, I love that NSYNC guy singing about his teeth. Alternately, I like Jimmy Neutron, which was really the first cartoon series to be animated in the 3D Toy Story style. I know the premise is basically the same as Fairly Odd Parents, but I like the characters better because Jimmy wasn't a gigantic power-mad jerk who put the world in jeopardy every episode. I mean, he did put the world in jeopardy once in that movie, but not in every episode. Besides, that was Tim Allen's fault. So the last Nicktoon I think was any good was Avatar, and that was just because it was a neat, kid-friendly anime series. It didn't really belong on Nickelodeon, but they had to get on the anime bandwagon somehow. Nick, you're like 5 years late. Let it go. So the date Nicktoons jumped the shark is July 9th, 2005. Most of you are not going to remember this show. See if you can make any musical sense of the theme song, because I can't. What is this, a classical polka rap? Are those supposed to be cats? Cats don't look like that. Percentage-wise, this is more cat than those three things. All these characters are either morally reprehensible or completely stupid, which is usual cartoon fare, but none of these guys are funny. At all. Even the Wayne Knight cat. This is easily the worst thing I've seen Wayne Knight in, and he was in Space Jam. I mean, Nicktoons don't have to be funny. Classic Geek Supo or Hey Arnold or even Doug, if you want to go back that far, aren't necessarily comedy shows. But this is all supposed to be funny, and none of it is funny. Yeah, so the show was pretty bad, but at least Nick had the good sense to cancel it after 20 episodes. But a shark jumping moment isn't always when you make something irredeemably bad. Sometimes it's just when you stop making good stuff for good. Let's look at the next few series. The X's, oh how original. An action hero family, I wonder where you got that idea. Apparently Nick got Patrick Warburton out from under Disney and made another 20-episode show with it. This one was similarly a failure because nobody had any decent humor, and humor was all they were going for. Next up was Mr. Meaty, which was all gross-out humor, like Ren and Stimpy without the... You know what? Comparing this to Ren and Stimpy is giving it too much credit. This one was pure crap and revolting to watch, and it ran for 20 episodes? I smell a contractual obligation. These three tie for the shortest running Nicktoons that weren't part of a bigger franchise. All of them. Back to back. 0506. Nick had a lot of catching up to do. Apparently they reconfigured their contract for the next season because the next three shows all had 26 episodes. At this point, Nick had some deal with DreamWorks that made them have more 3D animated shows like Jimmy Neutron as opposed to traditional 2D. Well, that didn't fix anything because they were all terrible. After Avatar, Nick hasn't made a good cartoon. At all. And of the pre-Avatar era, only 2 shows are left, and now they've gone pretty bad too. SpongeBob.
Oh, SpongeBob! Why?
I'm still gonna have to get back to you on that one. The other one was Fairly Odd Parents, which I didn't exactly like in the first place, but compared to what was on Nick in 2007, the 2001 episodes look like high art. But not anymore. They did everything they could to get this show over a shark. They brought in Norm Macdonald as a recurring character. They added a baby. They made 9 TV movies. They did 3 crossovers with Jimmy Neutron. Just throw in Ted McGinley and we have a full deck. But somehow, this thing has way overstayed its welcome on the air, despite Butch Hartman's obvious attempts at sabotaging his own cartoon. My theory is that they put it under the same directory as SpongeBob, too beloved and time-honored to scrap. You know, in 2004, the Rugrats were 13 years old, and they pulled the plug on them because it was their time. Why can't you do that now? The saddest thing I have ever seen Nickelodeon do is the live-action Fairly Odd Parents TV movie. They put Drake Bell in the pink hat, even though he was 25. They have that baby in it. This is the only movie I think is even too low for Randy Jackson. And Jason Alexander is in it too. This is easily the worst role I've ever seen Jason Alexander play. And he was this thing. And you want to know what the worst thing about this is? They're making a sequel. Hang on. Patrick Warburton, Wayne Knight, Jason Alexander, Wendy Malick, Kevin McDonald. Nickelodeon! What do you have against Seinfeld? So, I don't see Nickelodeon making a good series again anytime soon. Steven Hillenburg is pretty much gone. Class Geek Supo is done for after all the Rugrats spin-offs went nowhere. Jimmy Neutron Studio is pumping out half-hearted DreamWorks 26-episoders. And Butch Hartman keeps getting worse all the time. 2005, the year Nicktoons jumped the shark. But we're not done with Nicktoons yet. Next time we will be answering one of the most important questions in all of Nicktoon history. Who lives in a pineapple under the sea?